Hello and welcome once again to Talking Pictures Podcast. I'm your host David and joined with me as always my co-host Brian. Brian, how are you today?
I'm great, dickhead. How are you doing?
I'm good. We have a special episode. We're not just our two of us today. We've got two very special guests. We are joined today by Laurence and Nathan of Another Happy Pod and Still Got Legs. Guys, how are you today?
Hi David, doing good, thanks. Thanks for having us.
I'm doing good. I'm running high off the ego of you said my name first, so I'm going to hold that over Nathan.
I was listening back to some of your episodes, and Nathan always introduces you, Laurence, by your full name, and I was like, do I do that? Do I do both of their full names? But no, it's just as it is in the Zoom call for me. I was like, I'll read it left to right. But
Nice.
We were very graciously hosted on, or guested even, on your podcast, talking about X-Men First Class. You guys want to talk about your podcast? You have it, an advantage over us. Not one, but two podcasts.
Yeah. that's good of you to call it an advantage.
It is. You're exposed. You're more exposed out there, People have two chances to
I don't know, David.
Oh,
a wise man did once tell me, I think it was 2 days ago, that we've got a meaty podcast. Full of meat. Very, 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 very...
I'll take it back if you don't start behaving yourself, Brian, all right? No, what's the show, Nathan? Another Happy Pod. What's that?
Oh, no, mate, you tell me. That's the one you run.
Okay, all right, nice, cheers. It's a pop culture podcast. Comes out every Friday. We talk about anything and everything, but mostly X-Men as of recently. Yeah, go and listen. It was fun. We had the boys over. It was a good time.
It's not too dissimilar to this podcast, only... whereas this podcast, you're more focused most of the time anyway on more recent stuff that's just coming out. We just look like stuff from at any point in history. Well, I say history, mostly like the last 20 years or so. But like any point in pop culture, we'll just do a thing. We'll think, yeah, sure, that sounds fun. Let's talk about that because why not? Also, we're too lazy to go to the cinema, so.
Oh, you sometimes talk about video games as well on your podcast on Another Happy Pod.
Yeah. We'll do video games. We'll do movies. We'll do books. We've never done a book. I don't even know how we do that. We've done a pop concert movie, which I guess is kind of a movie, but it's.
Oh yeah.
And we've also done a play.
Yeah, that's probably the most out there.
We've done a play as well, kind of.
Yeah, but again, we do the film adaptation, not an adaptation, a filmed version of a play. Yeah.
But it's whatever,
But that's not all. You have another far more successful podcast. I say so myself. Well, you say it yourselves as well. It's not just me saying that. But
we do.
You guys have Still Got Legs, the Doctor Who rewatch podcast.
Still Got Legs, the younger, more successful brother of Another Happy Pod. Yeah, that's our exclusive Doctor Who rewatch podcast, where every week we just get together, talk about an episode of Doctor Who, making our way through the revival era. We're up to, when's this coming out?
This will be Wednesday, so this most recent Monday was the season 6 finale.
Okay, so we've just wrapped up series 6 earlier this week. Going to go into the Christmas special next week, so yeah, it's a good time. We like it. Some people like it.
Some people, yeah.
It does okay, I guess. Yeah.
But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk today about House of the Dragon. So both seasons 1 and 2. Season 2 just wrapped in the last couple of weeks. We've 2 years to wait until season 3. But it was confirmed, I think, just before season 2 came out, or was it after? Brian, you might know this. That season 3 and 4 are that's where it's going to end. We're ending at season 4.
We're in season 4. Oh, I didn't know that. Interesting.
Yeah, after the season 2 finale, it was then confirmed to bookend with 4 seasons in total. Before that, it was always an idea to let it run to 3 or 4 seasons, but it was never officially confirmed. Now, we can get into how we feel about that, especially with the quantity of episodes that they've released thus far, and the remaining potential episodes they could release. Does 4 seasons justify the overall run of the show? We can discuss about that. But yes, it was always going to be at least half the length of the flagship series Game of Thrones, except it's going to be running, I think, for the same amount of years, because season 1 premiered in 2022, season 2 premiered 2024. We won't be getting season 3 until 2026, and then season 4, which I'll just now say I bet will be 6 episodes, will be in 2028. So we will.
That's being conservative as well.
Yeah.
That's assuming that we'll get it every 2 years.
I've said this before on our podcast, but I really hate the way modern TV is done. I hate this 2-year gap in between TV shows. It absolutely just kills me. I just like, I'm old fashioned. I want it every year. You know, I'm greedy in that sense.
And it's the fact that the time in between the seasons seems to be getting longer, while the episode count, like Brian said, just seems to be getting shorter. I'm like, this should be going quicker. Like, I'm bad at maths, but I'm not that bad.
Yeah.
Like, it should be the other way, surely.
Funny enough, with the 2-year wait in between seasons, it doesn't feel like that started until we had to wait an extra year for the final season of Game of Thrones. We watched in 2017 season 7 of Game of Thrones, and we didn't get a return in 2018 because it was such a massive production, especially that Winter Has Come episode. So we didn't get that until 2019, the final season, and it was still 6 episodes, regardless of the minutes per episode. But ever since then, other major series with massive budgets like The Boys or The Umbrella Academy or anything spinning off of Game of Thrones, and even some major Netflix shows like Stranger Things, many years in between. So it's the norm now, and I believe that's as a result of streamers mostly not wanting to commit to greenlighting 2 seasons in the immediate go-ahead, because if the show does not receive the success it wants, well, then they're already committed to the season 2 making, because by the time the first season airs, they've already finished filming of the second season, and that's where the getting 2 seasons in 2 years comes into it. That's why it's I know this is a bit of a cheat, but shows like The Bear or What We Do in the Shadows or Only Murders in the Building, we get a season a year with those because they are relatively shorter and they're easier to make, but with the success those shows have, there's always getting a constant green light of them.
Yeah.
Where does everyone sit with Game of Thrones before we start talking about House of the Dragon? Where does everyone sit in terms of how they felt about Game of Thrones as a whole?
I love the finale.
Okay. You're looking for scrap, Brian.
I'm ready. I'm gonna go Optimus Prime and take you all on.
Just a bold claim right up top. I like that. I like Game of Thrones as a whole. Okay, Brian, I'm sorry, I can't say I agree with you about the finale. Okay, I like the show as a whole though. I think it was. It was obviously celebrated for a long time. It was a really well written show for the most part. And yeah, as the whole, I like it, but. Well, we can discuss other things.
Stings you in the end. Yeah.
I think it's more net positive than negative, and I think like what it did in its kind of early run for the kind of TV as a whole. You know, you can speak about the effect it's had now when like streamers got introduced and everything, but like it had a good effect in terms of people like mass public appreciation for kind of long form dramas, which is quite nice. But yeah, it's well, like you said, it stings you in the end. Unfortunately, you can't speak about Game of Thrones now without being like, that's a shame how it all wrapped up, though, isn't it? Which is such a sad thing, but yeah.
It had a chokehold on the world. I think it's the first time, really, that everyone watched a TV show. You know, I think when Game of Thrones and Breaking Bad both kind of airing at the same time, like, it was, these are major television events, and everyone is talking about it. And if you're not watching Game of Thrones, you're the weird person. You know, amongst your group of friends.
Yeah, 100%.
I think I agree with you two, not Brian, unfortunately, the ending stinks. But I think that it's a problem of structure. I think that when season after season after season, we're kind of led to believe that the major bad guy are these White Walkers, and it's the war to come, it's building and building and building. And then in that last season, they're dealt with by the halfway point, and then okay, well, now we've this other person to deal with, and that's not nearly as engaging as these White Walkers. I think that if you had restructured that whole season just to be that maybe in Winterfell they lost and all our main characters have to push back to King's Landing, and all the White Walkers and the Whites and all, they came with them down to King's Landing, and just make that, it just makes it more interesting and have all that drama in King's Landing then. However, I think that the main thing, like you said, Laurence, there, it's such a shame that when we talk about Game of Thrones, you have to talk about the ending and how it stung people.
Yeah.
And I think that, for me, I don't know about anyone else, but that for me was something that I really held on to going into House of the Dragon, the first season. I was so stung by it. I was like, do I really want to give this series a chance? Because I know how the last one left me. You know, no matter how far in advance this one is set, I think, 190 years before Game of Thrones. I know where the whole story ends, and it's in that disappointing manner. So I think when I first watched the show, I was kind of like arms folded, not wanting to give it a chance, and it took a few episodes before I settled into it. I don't know if you guys remember your first...
Yeah, I was 100% the same way. I remember specifically watching the first episode and being like, not that great, you know? And then I same as you, just went into it arms folded, like, go on then, impress me. Let's see if you can rectify the finale, I guess. But over time, it did slowly win me over. It did take a few episodes, but by like probably episode 3 or 4, I was like, okay, there's something here. There's definitely something in this. So yeah, it won me over.
Yeah, I think I don't remember specifically like my thought process when I sat down to watch it for the first time, but I remember in the lead up to it, I was kind of disinterested. But again, it's one of them things. Kind of, it had the same energy as Game of Thrones in that, you know, it was coming back and everyone was kind of going, like Nathan said, you know, what have you got to offer after your kind of embarrassment a couple of years back? And I just didn't want to get left behind, so I ended up watching it, and I was like, okay. And it took me back to the early days of Game of Thrones with the production value of later Game of Thrones, and I'm like, oh, this could be a match made in heaven here. Like, this is onto something. And I really enjoyed season 1 quite a lot.
It was also very quick. It was relatively quick after the ending of Game of Thrones. It was like 3 years after it, so not a huge amount of time to really let it sit, really.
Yeah. I remember thinking the premise, I was like, who cares about this? But then I watched it and I was like, oh, maybe me. Maybe I do a bit, yeah.
I remember myself, it was not until the time skip, the first major time skip of going from the kind of younger actresses to the older actresses, that's when it really hooked me. That it was like, because that was something I remember, Brian, I had said it to you, that was something I was afraid for. Do you ever, I don't know if either of you get this, or any of you get this, but when something is going to happen and you are kind of fearful on the show's behalf, if that makes sense, like, or do you know if you're like really interested in a film and then the movie does really badly, but it's like, oh, but I really like this, you know, like the only way I can really describe it is with stuff like the DCEU or with Marvel, because I like those things, and then so when they do badly, I'm kind of embarrassed for them. So it was when it came to the time skip, I was kind of concerned for. It's like, oh, people, it's not going to go as well as they think, and people are going to be confused. But I never heard any kind of rhetoric with that online of characters being confused, or the only confusing aspect is just the naming convention that they all share four names between them.
The names is so good. It's Jaehaerys or Beharis or Lamaris or
it's all the Rainies Rhaenyra.
Yeah.
It's too much.
There's like 5 Aegons in this one House of the Dragon show.
Yeah.
But that's a major plot point as well. The fact that half of them are called Aegon, which is something that obviously I want to talk about later. But how did you feel about the time skip as a whole, Brian? You we haven't spoken to you in a while, so
I'm just sitting here taking it all in, hearing all.
Yeah, but you're the co-host.
I'm just hearing all the false opinions and why everyone is wrong. Let me just say this one thing about the Game of Thrones finale. Mm-hmm. If we had an additional 4 episodes for the 8th and final season, therefore we'd have more time to grow the story to conclude it. I think so long as the quality still remains, as they've established they're capable of writing quality content, that show would have ended well. The worst thing I could say about the show finale is that it was too short, and that's all I have to say on that. So because I finished Game of Thrones accepting the finale, I was looking forward to House of the Dragon. A little bit too much, I think, because when I paid attention to the casting with Paddy Considine, Matt Smith, and then Olivia Cook, I realised that Olivia Cook and Emma Darcy were cast as the characters Alicent and Rhaenyra. And then, as I kept on going through Wikipedia, they casted Millie Aycock and, Lord forgive me, I forget what the younger actress' name was who played Alicent. But because I knew that there were going to be older actresses playing these characters, I was expecting them to be recast. I didn't think it was going to be halfway through. I thought it was going to be within the first episode. So while everyone, like yourself, David, and Nathan and Laurence, you're getting attached to these actresses, these young actresses playing these characters, whether you may or may not know, you've heard that they're going to be swapped over with older versions. I was playing the waiting game to see when it would happen. And because I knew that, I was able to digest it and I was able to welcome it more easily. Mm-hmm. And because when I think of the Game of Thrones finale, I don't have that sting. So I do get goosebumps when Paddy Considine as Viserys says he delivers the story of Ice and Fire to Rhaenyra when he names her his heir. And then of course at the end of season 2 when Matt Smith is informed of the vision, via the vision of what is to come in with Daenerys Targaryen. I look at it with a little bit of optimism, even though there are things I still would have preferred they didn't do, such as shorter seasons. I didn't like that. But when you said, David, that just because you know where the overarching story of Game of Thrones end, essentially, like the main timeline with the season 8 finale, there are still many smaller stories to be told, and this House of the Dragon, the Targaryen Civil War, it feels such a larger story, even though it's literally just two sides, but there's many factions within these two sides. You're following the story plots with the Sea Snake, you're following story plots with Aemon Targaryen, and then Matt Smith as Daemon had his major arc in season 2. Whether or not that's popular, we can get into that. But what I'm trying to say is, I'm liking the show an awful lot, and I've always liked it, and I consider it I consider it scheduled TV. Every time season 2 episode ended, I was counting the days for the next episode. Mm-hmm. As it got to the conclusion, I felt the absence of the showrunner from season 1. When Ryan Condal was left to write season 2 with George R.R. Martin to tell the story, I felt the lack of Miguel's writing, because I felt season 2, in hindsight now, was a very dragged out story. Like, they dragged out many story arcs with Rhaenyra being told how she can't lead a war and just stuck at Dragonstone, and how Matt Damon is just sitting back with a pack of cigarettes at Harrenhal.
Matt Damon or Matt Smith?
Matt Smith.
That's what I was just thinking.
Shit. I was thinking Matt Smith. Because Damon, because his whole arc is that he always believes that he should have been named heir. So he has his overextended arc played out in Harrenhal, and because this season was only 8 episodes and they dragged out other story arcs, you actually didn't need to do that. If you had made this season 10 episodes, and if you tightened up some of the story, we could have gotten to the next battle that they've teased for the 3rd season, which we're not going to get in 2 years. I don't know what battle that is. I know there's 2 or 3 major battles to come. I don't know the names of those battles, but I'm assuming one of them's going to come up in the first 1 or 2 episodes of season 3. If they had written a concise, more tight story and throw in those 2 extra episodes to make it a 10 episode season, well then it would have ended on a high note. And I didn't realize this until you said this to me, David, that we're just climbing up this mountain, ready for the battle, ready for the next major event, like we got with the Dance of the Dragons with Rhaenys riding Maelys was the name of her dragon. When
I don't know, the names of the dragons all confuse me. I just don't bother.
Well,
I literally just like
yeah.
Vhagar. He's the biggest one, and all the rest of them are dragons.
when Vhagar and Aemon took out the queen who never was, that episode,
Yeah.
that was the only major action with consequences this season, and I think we needed another one in season 2 at the end, but they've reserved that for season 3. A mistake, I think, and another mistake is that they've extended it to 4 seasons. I think you said this as well, David, that this House of the Dragon story would make a great, strong 3-season show.
Well, do you want to talk about some of those character arcs, like you said there? So, I'm most interested, to be honest, of everyone's opinion of Daemon, because I think he actually had the weakest storyline throughout the whole season. I think they really relegated him to the point. I don't know about the rest of you. I hate stories where a character can't tell the difference between reality and their dreams, and they just like, you know, where he's having the dream and then he wakes up at the table and then he's like, wait, what did you say? I just kind of hate that storytelling technique. It just goes on too long. But how did you guys feel about Daemon and his arc throughout the season?
Oh, it was a bit odd, wasn't it? It was definitely an interesting choice to have this character that so many people really liked within the first season of House of the Dragon. He's like a bit of a rebel, a bit of a fuckhead, a bit of a fuck you to the crown and all that kind of stuff, and a bit of a bad boy, and everyone kind of liked that. And then a bad boy with a heart of gold, who I think, like, kind of at the end of season 1, it came to the conclusion that, oh no, he actually does love his niece, who is his wife, and he actually will support. No, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. And he actually will support her, and that's kind of how it ended. And then season 2 kind of felt like a bit of a backtrack. It just felt like, oh no, actually, I don't support you. Actually, I think I deserve the crown for myself. And now I'm gonna go spend 7 episodes running around a haunted mansion, which just felt so bizarre. It was definitely an interesting choice, not my favorite part of the season at all. There was some interesting stuff more towards the end with like the visions and the witch and everything like that, but for the most part, it was just, odd, I would say.
I think that's my problem with it as well. My big thing with it is that like Nathan said, in season 1, I think he was such a interesting character because you never quite knew where he was off to and what he was really had going on, or what his motivations were, at least. But I liked that at the end of season 1, you know, he hands the crown back to Viserys as he like can barely stand. He, I mean, for fuck's sake, he's the person that crowns Rhaenyra at the end of the season. Like, he's the person that decrees she is our queen. And that's a major step. And in season 2, I don't mind it when characters have visions. I do mind it when it goes on for this long and it's visions of stuff we already knew from season 1. And then at the end of it, he goes, I think I'm ready to accept you as the queen. I'm like, so in other words, none of that needed to happen. Yeah. It was entirely to get you back to the end of season 1 again. Like, I don't know. I guess they have an army now, but then even that, there was a weird thing of like, that whole army turned with Daemon because they were like, we can't have a woman rule over. Daemon's much more suited. And then when Daemon goes, I reckon Rhaenyra's got it, they go, yeah, me and all. I'm like, I don't know, it felt also just the side point of it's incredibly frustrating to get an actor as good as Matt Smith, have him be one of people's fan favorites from season 1, and then go, for this season, he's not allowed to converse with anyone, you know. And it's like, what are we doing with this? But yeah. I
do agree with you, Laurence, about Daemon's arc and that he doesn't get to act around other characters we want him to see. Like, we all want to see him square off with Aemon. And we don't get much scenes with him and Rhaenyra throughout in the middle of the show. It's just the start and the end. But I can't deny that I really got hooked on his relationship in his companion, Sir Simon Strong, played by theatre veteran Simon Russell Beale, I believe his name is.
Is that the guy that keeps waking him up from his
Yes.
visions? Yeah, okay, yeah. All right.
He's a great drip as well, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He has, yeah.
I really like that character. I like him playing off Daemon. because he's very like, I wonder if sir you could perhaps provide the coin yourself. Trying to be very delicate in choosing his words so Damon doesn't lash out and whip out a knife to threaten him because as he did so at one point. So I did like those two playing off together. I actually do agree with you a little bit, Laurence, with how we're just back to square one and nothing happened. The only difference I feel with Damon is that going forward for the next 2 seasons, there is no question with Damon's loyalty anymore. If that character is to die, he will die for Rhaenyra, and we know where his loyalties are going forward. That book's end that part, I believe. I don't think they're going to rehash him wanting to seize the throne for himself anymore.
No, I think that's done now. I think that's... It seems like they put like a bookend on that storyline now, and that's where it's at. I think season 2 overall, I like season 2. Overall, I think it's a good season. I think I do have some issues with it in terms of like it is a bit of a broken promise in the sense that like, you know, season 1 ended with like, and now we're ready for war, and now we're ready for the big war, and then season 2 ends with, and now we're ready for war, and you know, it's just the kind of the same ending, but like, I think that's okay in the sense that like Game of Thrones was a very popular show, but it wasn't popular for its big battle sequences. You know, those were parts of the show, and those were parts that people liked and enjoyed. But if you think back to like the first season, there's no big battles. In fact, famously, there's a whole sequence where Tyrion gets knocked out because they don't have the budget to do a battle sequence. Okay, so they just skip over it. It got popular because of those intense dialogue sequences, because of the politics, because of the drama and the acting and everything like that. That's why it became such a successful show. So I don't necessarily mind a more scaled back season which focuses on that kind of stuff. I quite enjoy it, and I do think you get some really incredible standout moments of conversation and drama and dialogue, and we can go into those. But at the same time, I can recognize that it does feel like a bit of a broken promise overall in terms of where we are. But also, I should say, I have no idea how this is going to turn out. Like, I've not read the books, so I have like a vague idea of like roughly what happens because of what's been mentioned in Game of Thrones and other stuff. But like, overall, for the most part, I'm pretty blind going into all of this. So
I think that's a really great way of putting it, that it's a broken promise. I think I've never heard it actually expressed that way, but I completely agree that, yeah, every episode or the last season, the war has begun. And now here we are again. The war is about to begin. I think what you say is absolutely right. Not every single season of Game of Thrones had those big battles, but those scenes where you would have the conversations and scheming and people going behind people's back, there were big changes in the dynamics, relationships and power and where characters were. But this time around, there wasn't that, even though there were those conversations. And I think I know some of them that maybe you wanted to discuss there, but it just felt like the conversations didn't lead to much. I don't know about you, the final kind of, one of the final sequences with Daemon, where the Lord Tully, I think it was, you know, his grandfather died and he became the Lord.
Yeah.
And then they all have that conversation in the courtyard. I found that to be one of the most compelling scenes throughout the whole season. You know, really I like that more than the dragon seed, you know, when they were all claiming the dragons. Because it's like, okay, now here is Daemon facing some consequences and he has to put someone who he allied with to death, you know, to better the cause. And like, he's actually put on the spot and he's challenged about it. And I thought that was a big change in his dynamic and how he deals with things. So I think that, yeah, I absolutely agree that you don't always need a battle scene, but I just felt like characters were stagnated and there weren't many changes in dynamics and where characters were. I feel like almost all the characters at the end of last season are in roughly the same kind of position that they are at this start of this season.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I agree.
Or the end of this season, sorry.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, in terms of like general thoughts, because like with season 2 as a whole, I do think it is, to compare it to season 1 is almost a little bit unfair, because season 1 has incredible narrative device that it's built like a pressure cooker in that every episode we're watching a very important man, slowly chip away his own life, so that by the end of it, you're left sat there going, who has made the smartest moves in the entire season, so that when this old man dies, which he's obviously going to do because he's like a walking corpse for half the... Yeah, exactly. It's like we're on a timer for it. Then you get to see everyone is scheming, and everyone's kind of every conversation like that does matter because people are always trying to underhandedly get the upper hand in a way, whereas season 2 has to reconcile with how season 1 ended. And I think the first half of the season does a really interesting job at like building on that. But then by about the halfway point of season 2, it starts to just go, you start to kind of realize, oh, they didn't have much to sustain it. Like season 2 feels like ultimately kind of like Brian said, it's almost in a way feels like this condensed season, but they didn't rewrite the story to make it fit an 8-episode structure. It feels like these are the first 8 episodes and we're missing 2 episodes at the end. But I don't know.
Season 1 also has the fact that it takes place over roughly 25 to 30 years. I don't know about you guys, but this feels like it takes place over maximum 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You know, so they're with season 1, they have those opportunities to build these relationships and change them episode on episode, because one episode we have younger Rhaenyra and younger Alicent, and then all of a sudden it's 15 years later and they're obviously played by different actresses, but there's been multiple children and multiple years of tensions building, and you feel that from the first steps, from the first scene with them, where we're introduced to the older Rhaenyra. She's just given birth, and then the servant comes in and says, oh, the queen wants to see you, and then they have to go and walk all the way through the castle to see Alicent, and then she's, you know, throwing digs saying, oh, maybe the next one will look like you. Like, you already see there's a change in their dynamic since the last episode.
How good is Olivia Cook? She's so good, isn't she?
She's brilliant.
Do you remember when Steven Spielberg tried to convince her she was the most ugliest woman in the world?
What?
You need to get over this, Nathan.
Oh, yes. I forgot she was in
Was that when
Ready Player One.
Was that when
Ready Player One.
he had her character have a birthmark on her eye or forehead, like a very cute, perfectly shaped birthmark.
And then she called herself a monster because of it.
Did she?
Yeah.
Look away, I'm hideous. Yeah.
But it's okay. Ty Sheridan accepts her anyway. Was it Ty Sheridan?
It was Ty Sheridan.
Ty Sheridan
that was in
accepts her anyway.
his run of I'm the next leading man, and then no one liked him anymore.
Yeah, now hold on a minute. You guys are going to be talking about Ty Sheridan very, very soon. Okay,
true.
so
Yeah. I think we'll try and avoid it as best we can.
Not me, I got stuff to say. No, Olivia Cook is great. So just going back to what you were saying not too long ago, Brian, like about the cast and the younger cast switching over to the older ones. That wasn't something I knew going into the season. Like, because like I said, I hadn't read the books, didn't know that the first season or that the story took place over like however many years. You know, I was coming off Game of Thrones expecting like a story over the place of like 7-8 years or whatever like that, so I wasn't ready for this. So when like it does go into it and the cast do start to change, I was like, fuck, what's going on here? I was just getting used to these guys, and now they're replaced. But luckily we've had 4 incredible actresses play the 2 leads of the show. I think all 4 of them have been so fucking incredible. And right now with Emma Darcy and Olivia Cook, it's a shame that in season 2 there's only 2 scenes with them together, because both of those scenes I think are just electric. They're just so good. Any scene where it's just them 2 talking with each other, it's just, I could just eat it up all day long. It's so good.
Well, I think you can attest to this, David. Those 2 scenes, Nathan between Rhaenyra and Alicent in season 2, do not occur in the book. Because no, because they've developed a mini arc between those 2 characters in how the plot to put Aegon on the throne and not Rhaenyra. That whole plot, and how in the show it's written to be a true, honest misunderstanding, whereas in the book, who David has read, it's just Alicent. Nah, I'm gonna get my son on the throne.
yeah.
Interesting.
It's one of my favorite parts of the series as opposed to the book, because in the book it's very cut and dry. Viserys dies by himself. He speaks. I think he does speak about Aegon's dream, but it's by himself. No one hears him. Whereas in the show, Alicent is with him. It is a genuine misunderstanding, and then I'm glad that in season 2 we got that conversation between the two of them in the Sept, where she tells him his last words, and that realization on Rhaenyra's face when she's like, he's talking about Aegon the Conqueror, and then
You fucking idiot.
Alicent, it's literally, she like looks around and she's like, oh my god, I can't believe I've made this giant mistake. Oh, it's too late now. I guess I have to go through with it. Like, she genuinely, I think it's the best, because in the book it is very, no, we're going to install Aegon on the throne, and it's a plan that's set up by the Greens. In the book, Alicent is roughly 15 to 20 years older than Rhaenyra. They age her down in the show so that they are the same age.
Okay.
But no, she is like a 30-year-old beefing with a 15-year-old, like straight away. So
That's interesting.
It's one of my favorite aspects, I think, that the show did was change their dynamic. And so then in the last episode, when she comes and she is kind of begging for that chance to go back to, you know, what they offered, like peace and installing her on the throne, I think it's a great change to have her, because I think it would have been very easy if they had gone the route of the book, that people would have made the comparison between Alicent and Cersei in the original in Game of Thrones, because she does come across as a very cutthroat, like doing things for herself. But I like the way they've made her a bit more sympathetic, and that she is. I do feel like Alicent is always doing things that do service herself, but overall, what she thinks services the realm, and wants what's best for her kids.
That's very interesting. Yeah, interesting to make them contemporaries rather than sort of like a wicked stepmother, based on what you're saying, kind of role, really. Yeah, that definitely sounds like a change for the better.
What do just while we're talking about Alicent, her ending scene, while I think it's excellently performed, I mean, that goes across the board for the whole show, to be honest. There's even the weakest scenes in this show, I think every actor is like genuinely top tier stuff. Like they're giving kind of grade A performances. But what are your guys' opinions on Alicent coming round at the end? Because that's a pretty big shift in character for her to essentially put her ego aside and almost go to Rhaenyra with, yes, an incredible opportunity, but she's completely 180'd on their first conversation in the show of this season.
Yeah.
So I just want to say quickly, when I said like season 2 is a bit of a broken promise, I think that was unfair of me, because I don't necessarily think that's the case when it comes to the Greens, okay? Because I think there is some really good development and progression with the storyline of the Greens overall, because where season 1 ends and where season 2 ends with the Greens, entirely different places. Their story, their situation is entirely different compared to the end of the first season. And I think what happens to the Greens is so interesting over the course of this season. So I think it wasn't necessarily fair of me to say that. Anyway, sorry, go on,
But do you see the Greens as the main characters, though? Because I think a lot of people would.
Yeah, I see the Greens as the villains. I see the Greens as the villains. That's how I see it.
I'd agree.
But I know a lot of the trailers and stuff came out like, are you team green or team black? Like, they're kind of nearly
I think that's marketing.
putting them up
though.
as if they're.
That's
equal
marketing.
counterparts.
That's Team Iron Man, Team
Yeah.
Cap. It's just all.
Thanks a lot, Civil War.
It's just the way I see it. This is just my interpretation, but I definitely see the Greens as the villains of the story. Again, haven't read the book, so I don't know for certain. But that's just like from the way I interpret the story and from my media literacy skills, which aren't that great at the best of times, but sure. That's how I interpret things. That they're the villains of the
Yeah,
story.
no, that's fair.
Well, I think it's easy to call them villains when you have the likes of Aemond One Eye, Sir Christian Cole calling little girls cunts because he's got a 15-year grudge holding against her, and Clubfoot Wanker, Laurence.
Oh God, yeah, yeah.
Oh, Jesus.
So,
yeah.
with many psychopaths on Team Green, I think it's more easy to place them as the villains when the biggest psychopath, I guess you could arguably say, on Rhaenyra's side is Daemon. And as we said previously, I think that whole aspect is bookended now. But back to what you said, Laurence, with Alicent doing a 180, she not just does that, and I do fear she's going to pull the rug from under you again and turn back towards the Team Green, but she agrees to Rhaenyra killing her sons, Aemond and Aegon, you know?
Yeah.
And while Aegon is now fleeing King's Landing with Sir Laurence, who is a villain who's been left alive 2 seasons too long now, she's left... she's agreed to Rhaenyra to deal with Aemond in the next few battles to come, and I don't know how that's going to end, as I believe they have teased a duel between Daemon and Aemond, and that can go either way. But I don't know where Alicent's story will conclude. Like, it could conclude with her fleeing off into a quiet life, because where are the High Towers in the Game of Thrones series? They're a name that's not mentioned, whereas a name that is mentioned in the House of the Dragon show as a supporting subplot is Lannister. The 2 Lannister brothers, played by the one actor, the characters Jason and Tyland, they're very much supporting characters. One of them says, I would do anything for my lady wife, when he's proposing to a 12-year-old Rhaenyra. And the other guy, Tyland, who's the Master of Ships, who was in the mud fight trying to recruit an army across the sea. So those characters have roles to play, but I just wanted to mention that actor playing the twins, he was in, I think, the first episode of Game of Thrones. He was, what was that duel? You're on a horse and your 2 spears are...
Oh, jousting.
He was one of the guys on the horse, and I think it was it the Mountain who killed him. He was talking to Ned Stark. That's the same actor.
Interesting.
Yeah. So they brought back they recasted a character from one episode of Game of Thrones and made him a supporting character in 2 roles in this. I just thought that was interesting. But these characters' arcs could go anywhere, and I just hope that they don't go too nuts with killing them off so quickly. Whether the story calls for it or not, I'm not sure. Like, I do like the Queen Who Never Was, Rhaenys, and her glorious battle, but with Game of Thrones content, we need stakes to keep us invested. And that's just a very surface level to explain why we should have character death in it. And I think hers was one that was necessary, because well, I don't know about you, my favorite character is actually not Daemon. It's actually Corus Velaryon, the sea snake. He's actually my favorite character in the show. And that whole story arc with him in this season, where his neglected bastard sons have played roles now in ally and up with Rhaenyra, that's gonna go somewhere. I don't know just yet, but I'm very eager to see what comes of it. And I think the actor who plays him, Steve Toussaint, he's just a standout for me.
He's very good.
He is great. While we're talking about, I'm sorry if I interrupted you, David. What do we think about that whole aspect with the sea snake and his 2 sons now rising up the ranks?
For the first half of the season, the sea snake storyline very much confused me. Like, I don't know if I missed something in some of the early episodes, but I was like, who the fuck is this guy he keeps talking to? What are they going on about? It's just cryptic conversations here and there. And then Rhaenys is coming in and like touching his face, and she's like, "Oh, you're very beautiful." I'm like, "Who is this guy?" And then at one point, there's obviously the reveal that he's the son, and everything like that. I was like, "Oh, that makes sense." I'm like, I must be a fucking idiot, because I don't know if they mentioned that before and I just missed it. I don't know. But once we learned that information, once the show made it clear that, you know, he was there, like, sons from like a mistress or whatever. And they're like, the way that culminates, I think, is very interesting. And the actor who plays his son, not Adam, the other one, whose name I can't remember, but the guy who's like, what was it? Sorry,
his name is Alan, Alyn.
Alan Adam, great names. Yeah, the actor who plays Alan, I don't have his name here off the top of my head, but very, very good actor, very good actor. So, and that scene where he just like finally calls him out at the end, like he can't contain it anymore, and he just snaps at him, calling him out on his shit. So interesting and so
doesn't
performed.
Corus say like, "I'm trying to help you," and he's like, "Get the fuck out" with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's great.
Very good
that's
scene.
Great scene.
Yeah, I really like this. Like I said, it started off on a bit of a shaky foot for me, but where it ends up, I really like what the arc the Sea Snake goes on throughout this season.
There's a big change from the book as well. They age those two characters up because in the book he doesn't claim them as his bastards. They are supposed to be Laenor's bastards. So to kind of give a little bit more legitimacy to Laenor and the fact that he was interested in women, I say that with air quotes, and they play them off as if they are his bastards, and
right,
but they are in fact Corlys's. So he does accept them in the show, but that's not in the book. I just thought I don't have much else to say on the Sea Snake, but I just thought that was an interesting change that they made.
I do like with the Sea Snake that he's kind of. I was in the same boat as Nathan. For the longest time in season 2, I was kind of just like, what? I don't really get where this is going. I don't know if this is important or if it's kind of like more of the filler stuff. I'm indifferent on it, but I do really like the component that from season 1, every single time you touch base with that guy, he's going on and on about honor and legacy and what it means for his name to be kind of spoken about in the same breath as the throne and everything, and that's all very interesting. And to have that kind of retroactively addressed by way of like, you can't be that honorable then if you're neglecting 2 bastard sons, barely like kind of seeing yourself still in the high ground of like, I should help these guys out. I'm like, well, you should have probably turned up a few more years ago. But I think all of that stuff's very interesting. But as a character, I've never gotten on board. Really, I find his stuff largely disconnected a lot of the time. Maybe I'm being really dumb, but I find a lot of his stuff quite disconnected from the main plot. So for me, I was a little bit like, whenever we were watching the High Towers, I was like, hell yeah, this is a show that I wanted to watch. And whenever we kind of cut back to what kind of everyone else is up to, including the Sea Snake stuff, I was a little bit like, I could take or leave a lot of this.
I see where you're coming from, Laurence. I think there is an element of the fact that there's so many few memorable faces or named faces on Team Rhaenyra, and you have the Sea Snake who's pretty much doing his own thing. Really, it was actually Rhaenyra and the Sea Snake's wife Rhaenys who were playing the Game of Thrones to play the side, and it's not until she dies a few episodes later she names her husband her hand, probably in one way to help rectify the fact that she was an indirect cause to his wife's death and she can't lose any more allies right now. So I see where you're coming from, and I do agree with you in a way. But it is, I will admit as well, it is coming down to the simplicity of the fact that I just think he's a cool character. He's a cool looking dude, and I believe, I don't know if it's confirmed yet, but they are developing an animated Game of Thrones series about that character in his prime. It's called 9 Voyages, I think, and the reason it's going to be animated is because it's too expensive to make in live action. So I think that's one to keep an eye out should it get greenlit.
Interesting.
Nice.
Okay.
Nathan, you had mentioned there just about what you thought was your failure at media literacy, even though you were going on about it earlier about how great it was. But the fact that we saw the 2 of the Sea Snake's bastards, but we also saw 2 other bastards then in King's Landing. Did you kind of... I felt that they were really out of place because it was just all of a sudden we met these 2 characters. We're not really fully introduced to them, and it's just all of a sudden... I thought that initially we were just seeing the plight of the small folk in King's Landing, but it's like we're spending a lot of time with these guys, but nothing has happened. It's not until like episode 7 of 8 that it's, okay, these are the Targaryen bastards and there's a possibility they could ride dragons. It just kind of was sowing the seeds, I understand, but it's too early on and not effective enough that I'm anticipating that, okay, something is happening with these, because it's just like maybe not even one scene every episode. It's like an episode or a scene every 2 or 3 episodes, and then all of a sudden, okay, they're a big part of it now.
Yeah, it was again another quite odd choice that we did keep revisiting, kind of infrequently, but coming back to these characters. There was a focus on the small folk of King's Landing, and it was kind of it was unequal. It was an unequal focus on them, because I feel like they chose to make one's story much more compelling than the other, because like you've obviously got the more honorable of the two, who's like, you know, he had the family, he had the daughter who was very sick and everything like that, and he was like trying to provide and everything for her. Unfortunately, the daughter passed away and everything like that, and you know, it was quite infrequent, but I didn't so much mind his story every time it came up. I don't know the character's name, I don't have it here.
Hugh Hammer.
There we go. I didn't necessarily mind it. I quite enjoyed those fleeting moments that we did get. The other one felt so fucking out of place.
Ulf White was his name.
Yeah, that it felt so out of place. It felt so modern and so just wrong to the Game of Thrones universe. Because like anytime we cut to like him and his mates in like the pub, the tavern or whatever, it just seemed like fucking that those were just like four lads at the pub, you know? And I guess that's like kind of the vibe they're going for, but it just didn't fit the aesthetic of the Game of Thrones world, you know? It didn't fit this Westeros setting. It just felt very much out of place, really, for me anyway.
I hated that. It felt to me like, you know, when do you remember when Ed Sheeran showed up in Game of Thrones?
Yes.
It felt like, obviously, maybe not too egregious, because this guy is obviously an actor by trade, whereas Ed Sheeran is struggling through any scene he was in, or only one, I think. But the thing that bothered, kind of exactly what Nathan was saying, the thing that bothered me about that is like, these stories are so interesting and compelling because they are completely detached from anything. You could look out your window, you wouldn't see a single thing that you could see in any kind of average Game of Thrones set, right? And it's such a compelling world because it's so unlike anything you'll ever encounter. And then when it cuts to this, I don't even know how to describe it. It's kind of like this weird, like laddish character that, like Nathan said, feels way too modern.
Jay from The Inbetweeners, if he was in Westeros.
Literally.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what the line that I thought, right, no, I'm bringing this up, I'm making a note about this. Right, it was they were all invited to the table, and Rhaenyra's son was getting a bit fucking pissed off the fact that this guy was just there and he wasn't really paying much respect to where he was and forgetting his table manners and everything. And he went, bloody hell, you guys ought to lighten up a bit. I was like, shut up, man. I hate this character's inclusion so much. But yeah, what do you guys make of the that riding a dragon subplot anyway? Because I gotta say, I was bored shitless watching all of that unfold.
Ever since Daemon went down to the caves to essentially wake up Vermithor, singing the tune, I actually didn't know what dragon that was, teasing that it's the second largest dragon, as very clearly said and explained by Rhaenyra. Ever since they've teased that dragon, I've always been interested to see it, in action or just in motion. And the fact that it's the most war weary, it's the one with the most experience. It's gained a lot of scars in its years, but yeah, it's not the largest, you know. But it will give a dragon like Vhagar a run for their money. So I was always curious to see that they've been teasing this arc of getting dragon riders. I just wanted to see what were they going to do with that dragon, because you know, when you have so many dragons in a show like this, well then, you know, you're gonna, I don't know how David can identify the difference in each. One's grey, one's red, one's brown, one's blue. Like, I mean, it's quite obvious, unless you're colorblind, which is completely understandable. But obviously, I think the way I viewed them as, like, I'm probably just being a very much a child in viewing this, but I just see them as different, diverse characters, even by their size or their texture or their shape. Like Vhagar looks like the gullet on Vhagar's like neck almost looks like a water dragon. I don't know why I think that, or like a dinosaur, if even, you know. And Caraxes, Daemon's dragon with the long neck, looks like a very traditional dragon, but it's very snarly. Whereas Syrax, Rhaenyra's dragon, it's very much it's a cute little dragon, you know, may as well be Spyro. I was looking forward to that whole tease with the dragons, and the fact that they've been teasing these two guys, these two bastards, I like the fact that they were both different among themselves. As you said, Nathan, that one was more honourable and the other one was, just a lad. I like that they weren't the same. I like that both of them, that they put screen time in minutes in this show to keep going back to them. Whether that was done the best way or not, it's down to the individual opinion. But the fact that these two characters are not going anywhere, that they're going to have roles to play, and I think it's quite obvious that the one who claimed Vermitor, Hugh Hammer, who's the honourable one, he's going to have a bit of a role to play. I'd like to think so. Whereas the other one, Ulf, who has the blue dragon, I 100% believe that he's going to turn tail and turn off to the Greens, whether by indirect action or not. But see, when they cut away to him, he was already flying over in King's Landing, and then Aemon goes to see what's going on. I thought he just took the dragon and left, but they didn't do that. So it's one less character to be mad about, because when a dickhead in these shows is alive after 2 or 3 seasons, it's a bit unbearable to watch them.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
That is very true.
I like the dragon stuff. The dragon, the whole sequence of them like claiming the dragons, and was it Vernifor, the big one, who was just like, fuck you, I'm going to eat you all. Actually, that was a good sequence, and it was clearly like, all right, this is where the money's going for the most part. This is like, there's some expensive shots in this episode, so here, enjoy it. Here we go. It was an interesting sequence, and I did quite like it. It's just one of those things. It's like the show overall, you come for the dragon. It's called House of the Dragon, okay? The big attracting feature of it is like Game of Thrones, dragons are extinct. There's no dragons anymore. There's just only the 3 which come with Daenerys at the end of season 1, and then we see them grow, and it's not until the end of the series really that we have these 3 and then 2 and then 1 dragon, and so they're quite sparse in that universe. And the attraction of House of the Dragons was, no, there's dragons aplenty, there's so many, we got a big dragon keep in King's Landing and everything like this. So I always want to see more of the dragons in the dragon show, so I always feel like anytime we do get a big sequence of them, I'm gonna fucking eat that stuff up. I just kind of wish there was more of it throughout the whole show. Really,
maybe I'm coming at it from a weird perspective, but for me, it just felt like I like the stuff of the honorable guy. I like him trying to claim his dragon, and he kind of like screams in its face. He's the only person that is quite like blatantly defiant and not run. He's obviously terrified, but he's expressing it smarter than the others. He's not just turning tail and running. But just for me, this might be a bit of an unfair critique. And admittedly, I did watch. I've watched this entire season of TV across 2 days. So I watched it in a because I started it a while ago, and then I thought, right, I don't remember a lot of it, so I'm just going to go back and watch the whole thing for this. And so it's in a bit of a vacuum, but for me, it felt like giving Rhaenyra and kind of her cohort a bit of busy work when it came to let's have a big meeting of 30 people that might be able to ride dragons, and then it's fun watching them all get burnt and everything. That is good dragon stuff, but it just felt like a little bit like, this isn't contributing a lot. And by the end of it, there's 2 dragon riders, and I'm like, great, we're gonna see what they needed the dragon riders for. And then because it ends prematurely before you get to see what they go and do with those big dragons, it kind of for me just felt like we were kicking rocks here, weren't we? We were just kind of waiting for this season to end a little bit. But again, it could be completely unfair.
No, I think that's a really great point, because in a lot of ways, it doesn't matter how big your army is. If you have more dragons, you win. That seems to be kind of what it comes down to. Even though the Greens do have the bigger dragon, it's only 1. So kind of that's obviously when Aemon flies over and he sees, oh, they've got 3. Shit, I better go back. So it does seem like, it's whoever has the most dragon win. But in that sequence, you're right. It is just, she brings them all to the dragon pit, and it's like, all right, best of luck. See you later. There's no instruction given. And it's not like we'll go up one at a time, really maximize our chances, because like she puts, say, 30 to 40 people there, and Vermithor just burns half them straight away. Like there's no chance for
Yeah.
them. So
They could have been amazing dragon riders.
yeah, we
We'll
never know. Like
Yeah.
all it took was for one of them.
Clearly, they wouldn't be amazing dragon riders because they got burned. That's the whole point. An amazing dragon rider wouldn't have got burned. They would have claimed the dragon. You know? Sorry, David. Go on.
No, it just seems like the only thing that needed to be done was for someone to stand up to the dragon, to not be afraid of it. That's all really Hugh Hammer
yeah.
did was shout back at it. You there speaking about not being burned by a dragon. I know we're obviously kind of coming closer to time, but Aegon, he was our king for this season, and he was left in an awful way. He obviously started out. I don't know about you, but there was a few scenes where not even a few. There was one scene where he was doing his kind of kingly duties, something that we don't really ever see in Game of Thrones, where he sat on the throne. The small folk, come to him, and he deals with the problems. And I thought, for the most part, okay, he seems to be fairly good at this. And it's not until Otto Hightower comes in and says, no, we can't do that. No, we can't do that. And I think that, if given the chance under different circumstances, if Rhaenyra wasn't a claimant to the throne, he would have been a fairly okay king. He seems to have like some good opinions and some good, he says, we're nothing without the small folk. We can't win this war without you. So it was interesting to see him kind of do that role, but then obviously he goes through a lot of hardship in that he loses his son. He is crippled. He essentially kind of, after he gets burned, he loses his dragon as well, but after he gets burned, then he was very reminiscent of Viserys towards the end of the first season. He is crippled and he kind of goes on the run. What did you guys think of Aegon, and then by extension Aemond taking over that kingly role? Something that I think that Aemond, even he expresses it in the first season, it's like, it should be me. He kind of is very similar to Daemon in that way, that they are probably the better suited for the role of king, but that's not their destiny.
Nah, he's a cunt.
Which one? Both or just?
No,
Both, they are.
Aegon, it's interesting. Look, we've been bred to expect quality from villainous characters, to see the good in them, So it's meeting the standard to see Aegon actually try to be a good character, to be a good person. So to see him his hardships, lose his son, he smashes his father's entire the whole replica of King's Landing.
Oh, broke my heart.
An entire season's worth of work just smashed, and then make stupid decisions, and then face the consequences as a result. You see your brother coming with the largest dragon in the world, and to save you, nah, you're fucked. And then poor fucker got his cock burnt off as well. And now, yes, Dave, you said he's very reminiscent now of his father, but I like how Clubfoot has stepped in, because he can't really wiggle his toes in with Aemond, because Aemon's too he's too farce for him. He's too direct. When Aemon says, I need a new hand now that I'm leading King's Landing in my brother's stead, and he says, Lord Laurence. And Laura's, oh, you honour me, your grace. No, you fucking wit. And so get my grandfather back. Get Otto Hightower back, who I'd like to talk about before we wrap up. But
yeah, definitely.
But so now Laris has seen that, okay, I can't sneak my way to whisper in your ear. I'll go back to the cripple who I can compare myself to in my hardships. And he's conceived a plan. I don't know what his end goal is. Obviously to take him out of King's Landing, and I don't know what they're going to do for what feels like a story that is near its end. Where are they going to go when all these battles with Aemond and Rhaenyra, are the Greens and the Blacks, are continuing?
Didn't they say they're going to Essos?
Yes, they did say they're going to Essos, and I've no idea what role they could do from Essos. If it's something good and interesting, I'd welcome it. They're not going to be capable of much physically, like Aegon could have been capable of a lot physically, especially as a dragon rider, but now he's not. His dragon's dead. And so I like the pairing of them two, probably makes it easier to see their demise.
I may have a spicy take on Aegon
Oh,
in that I think he's the most interesting character of the season.
Okay. Expand.
I can see from your quizzical looks that I might need to
Show your workings, please. Yeah.
So I think, look, I know he is a prick, right? I get it. I get that he's a prick, and I get that he's like, you know, he was a bully when he was little, and he can be an idiot, and he's very naive, and if you pardon the pun, very green when it comes to the role of being a king. But like,
And a rapist.
Yes, I know. But look, point me to someone in King's Landing that's not, and come on.
I'm saying.
I know. Look, not defending any of that, obviously. The thing that I find interesting about his character is that whilst he is incredibly flawed, he puts his genuine best foot forward in terms of wanting to be a good king, right? And wanting to rule the kingdom fairly and obviously very naively, and he needs his hand's help, which he fires like an idiot. But I find it very, very compelling that he was a man that was never prepared for this, because Viserys was so steadfast in his belief that Rhaenyra would ascend the throne after he died. So he was never prepared, completely taken aback when it came to being crowned. And everyone around him says, "You're a terrible king." And then when he tries to be a good king, they go, "You're a fucking idiot. Never try again." And obviously, then his son dies from a war that he wasn't really to blame for starting. And it completely throws him for a loop, as it fairly would do. And the thing that I find quite narratively compelling is that at the end of it, we spoke a little bit earlier about Alicent. She says fair fucks to Rhaenyra, kill him, behead him. Right, that's your claim, done. She gives up her son, and I find it a very puzzling decision on Alicent's part, because she grew up in this exact same scenario. She was essentially, maybe not the right word for it, but it was essentially groomed by her own father to stake her claim and land her foot in politics from a very young age. And it's almost the same as what Otto and Alicent teamed up to do to Aegon. Essentially, you're the figurehead, we're the puppet masters.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just find all of that very interesting. I find it, obviously, I'm not sat there going he's like the most sympathetic character ever, but it's hard not to empathize a little bit with a guy whose 4-year-old son gets beheaded and everyone calls an idiot all day long. So I don't know, what do you guys make on him as a whole?
To be fair to Alicent, she didn't just say, yeah, take Aegon, fair fucks, you know? She wasn't just like, yeah, no worries, mate, have him, easy as that. There was...
No, but she did nod and go, yeah, go on.
After considerable time and reluctance, you know, it's like Helena didn't just go, yeah, kill that one, did she? You know,
I completely get that, but I just think Alicent does hold pretty much. Well, her and Otto have equal blame to share in putting Aegon there. Aegon was in bed; he ran away from the scenario.
Womp, womp.
He didn't want to be king at all.
Womp.
No, right, but then like, I just find it like he's a character that didn't ask to be put in that scenario, and when he's put in that scenario, is pretty much powerless from the get-go. And then people who have been pulling his strings the entire time go, he is to blame. We should get this guy's head on a stake. And it's like, I don't know. I find it, again, not defending anyone's actions, a very narratively rich situation.
Yeah.
I think.
just because he said, yeah, you deserve some sheep or whatever, doesn't mean he's a good king. Okay?
No,
I
but
don't think there's.
that's not what I'm
I
saying.
think, like, everything else the show is telling us, every other decision is showing us this guy is not a good king. He's hot-headed. He's quick to anger. He makes rash decisions, and just ends up slaughtering a bunch of innocent people because of what happened. He's not good at making decisions. And Otto, sure, did do a lot of manipulation and everything like that, but Otto was absolutely right to call him a fucking idiot, because he is a fucking idiot.
I'm not claiming he's not an idiot. I'm not claiming he's a good king. I'm just saying he's a very compelling character to watch.
You just said
for
he's
how
a
his
good
story
king.
Unfolds. No, I said he tries to be a good king, and everyone around him calls him an idiot because he is one.
He is an idiot. That's true.
Yeah. What do you guys think?
I think what you said there is bang on the money. I never really thought about it like that, but yeah, he grew up always just assuming that, oh yeah, Rhaenyra will be queen, and then he is manipulated and thrust into this position, but then as soon as he's in it and he's told, no, you will be king, the most powerful person in the world, and then as soon as he's in that position, he's told, you're an idiot, stop, what are you doing, kind of.
Yeah.
And I think Alicent and Otto thought, well, we got our hooks into Viserys and we were able to manipulate him to an extent. This will be even easier because he is our, Alicent's son, Otto's grandson. So it's very, very easy to manipulate. So I think, yeah, you're right. He wasn't ever bred to be a king. When he tries to be a good king, it backfires. He's told stop. And so the only thing, he is thrust into this. He loses his son. Anyone will be pissed off about that. And then as soon as you get kind of a chance to retaliate, you're also given he's given the Aegon the Conqueror's crown and sword and battle armor, and for him, when you think about the kind of context of the show, for Aegon the Conqueror is his great-granddad. His great-great-granddad. So it's not that far off. Like, we're only kind of roughly about 100 years after Aegon's conquest. So it's, for them, recent history. So he would look up to it. So it's big shoes to fill, when you think about it. Vhagar was Aegon's sister's dragon. It's all these names of dragons. So Vhagar has been around since Aegon's conquest, So it's big shoes to fill. He tries to fill them and he's told, you're not filling those at all. So I actually agree with you, Laurence. I think that's an interesting way to look at Aegon. But still, can't excuse a rapist.
Yeah, no, absolutely not.
Incest is okay, but not rape.
When your last name's Targaryen, the incest is fine.
Incest is fine,
Yeah.
whatever. Speaking of which, I think his sister wife is so much more interesting than he is. Okay, Helena is so much more of an interesting character than Aegon, in my opinion. Anyway,
I really love the performance there. I love the moment. Obviously, we haven't really spoken about it, but the blood and cheese scene. Coming in episode 1, I apparently it's not. I don't know, David, as a book fan, is it like quite a faithful adaptation? I've seen mixed thoughts.
It's hard because I read the book right after watching the first season, so I don't remember it fully. I think in terms of the changes, it is a faithful adaptation, but the changes come from how it comes to be. How Daemon kind of tells the Ratcatcher. He says, just get Aemond. He never tells them a son for a son. They make that up themselves. And it's a bit more ambiguous in the book that they don't actually say what Aemond said. Or not what Aemond said, what Daemon said. So it's just a little bit more ambiguous in the book, but it's more clear and cut that the Ratcatchers kind of took it upon themselves to go, okay, well, if we can't get Aemond, a son is a son. So we'll go for that. So
anyone will do kind of situation. Yeah. I know, I just love the performance of the actress that plays Helena. Just that moment of like taking the other child, leaving, as you can hear those horrifying sounds of like brutal. The sword or the axe or whatever they've got going on. And then just the way, like, the first person she encounters happens to be her mum, and she says, like, they killed the boy. And it's just like that performance. There's a lot that's been said, I believe, about quite kind of like how autistically coded it is in terms of like the character's portrayal. But yeah, I just think it's a thoroughly fascinating performance. And like the other times we see kind of being paraded about King's Landing to show like a resilient front kind of thing. It's so apparent that she's out of place. She has that heartbreaking line about like, I was happier when I wasn't the queen. And then they say like, Alicent says like, would you like to get out of this place? And she smiles thinking about it, and then heartbreakingly says, where would I go? And it's like, oh man, I want to take this character out of that family. And get them far away from these horrible people.
All I want is for Alicent and Rhaenyra to go live in the woods together, to get married, and to raise their autistic daughter, autistic future-seeing daughter in peace, okay? That's all I want, and I'll be happy.
I'm looking forward to seeing her other son. So there's...
They mentioned this. Yeah, they brought up the other son. I'm like, did I miss something? When was this cunt born? I missed
so
this.
He's Aemond and Aegon's younger brother. I think he is the youngest. He's always been in Hightower. He's not mentioned in season 1 at all. It's only in the conversation between Alicent and her brother that he's brought up. But he is, I believe he's studying in Old Town to become a maester. But he has yet to be introduced, but he also has a dragon. So that is something that we'll see, that they're kind of counting
This is
him.
a rule of this show. Everyone has as many sons, daughters, brothers, sisters as the plot needs.
Mm-hmm.
And if they have a dragon, they also have a dragon, and that dragon's been around, and everyone knows about that dragon, but was never mentioned
Except for
until
us.
this point. Yeah.
So if he has a dragon, I'm assuming he's Viserys' son then as well.
He is, yeah.
Yes. Okay. Interesting.
And he's the youngest, did we say?
I believe so. I believe he's the youngest, yeah.
Oh yeah, because he couldn't be the oldest, could he? 'Cause he'd be the heir.
Yeah,
at that
no,
point.
he's definitely the youngest. It's interesting because I think it's so heartbreaking for Alicent because when she has that conversation with her brother and he just reassures her like, oh, he's really kind, and that's all she wants. I think that's what hurts her so much is that Aemond and Aegon are so cruel, and then Helena has to suffer that as well, But then the only child that she didn't actually raise, he's essentially kind of been always in Old Town or in Hightower, I'm not sure exactly which it is that he's the only one that is described as a kind character, and everyone likes him. So it's really hard for her to, to deal with that, your only child that is actually in some way decent, you had no hand in raising.
Yeah. Oh,
Daron was his name, was it?
Daron, yeah.
Yeah.
How old is he? Did they say he was 16 or something like that?
It could, yeah, he's young. I think
He's
he
young.
might be just in Hightower, just like being like someone's cupbearer or someone's squire or something like that.
Yeah.
The kind of with the normal route for when you're born, you're a highborn, but you're never going to actually be a lord, or you're never going to be an heir or king or anything like that. You just become someone's squire and then a knight.
Speaking of high, I was expecting the return of Otto Hightower at the end of the season.
Yeah.
And it just suddenly reveals that he's a prisoner in a cage somewhere. And we don't know where he is. We don't know who has him captured. We don't know how long he's being captured. That I think was a mistake and a flaw as a result of how they've structured the story of this show through 8 episodes. We needed an answer from that there. You can't just, in a montage, to boost the tease of a season that's 2 years away and not know what's going to happen.
It's really bothered you, the 2 years away thing, isn't it? It's really got under your skin.
Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. There's plenty of other content to keep distracted. What actually bothers me more is that they haven't even filmed yet season 3.
Jesus. I didn't know that.
I understand if you didn't start filming season 2 until after season 1 because you wanted to be assured that you're going to be successful, which they were. Great. Green light the next 2 seasons at least. And if you wanted to, you did. They've only drawn it out to 4 seasons just for the money, just for the prolonging the consumerism, and that's it. And that doesn't matter, and because. Well, I'm saving this information for towards the very end, but it's not the only spin-off of Game of Thrones that we'll be watching within the year, because we've got another spin-off coming.
Well, I don't really have too much else to discuss. Is there any other kind of points that we didn't touch on of any of season 1 or 2 that anyone wants to discuss before we wrap it up?
There's just
I
one.
will say just quickly. Sorry, Brian.
Sorry.
I will say just quickly. I think there's one thing. One of my biggest criticisms about series 2 or season 2 is that kind of the disservice it did to Baela, I think, because they spend a lot of time focusing on Baela and her quest to get her dragon and everything like that, and they built up to it, and they built up to the dragon in the Vale and all this kind of stuff, and then we finally see her attempting to go for the dragon, and then that's it, and it's just see you next year, I guess, or 2 years. It's a bit of a shit time for her, really.
It feels like there's a lot of characters that they will be explored next time, so it just means that this time they're in kind of a little bit of an interim, we don't really have anything for you right now, but we'll still remind people that you're here. I felt like that was a lot of what was the character's name, Jace, her Rhaenyra's son. It just felt like he was kind of he was just kind of moping around the castle.
He did spend a lot of time just posing. Yeah,
he'd walk in, complain, and then she'd be like, "Shut up,"
then pout at the camera.
He'd pout about it, and he's like, "Oh God, why are you spending so much time with all these bastards? I'm a bastard too, But Baela definitely felt like she got the short end of the stick. But how did you feel about Rhaenys then, her sister, who she's treated differently because she has the dragon?
Are we sure?
Yeah.
Are we sure that's the names?
It might be the other way around. It might be Rhaena that.
I think Rhaena was the one who was wandering through the Vale wilderness.
Oh, was it?
I think that's Rhaena, and Bela is the other daughter of Daemon who is betrothed to Jace, and
His fucking names, man.
so I think that's who they are. But sorry, David, what were you saying about Bela in that?
I just find it interesting that value is only really given to characters that have dragon.
Yeah, and well, now Bella has made a name for herself, and now she's gonna come into the fold. And I just hope that it's not going to be completed in over the form of 2 episodes, because that's what the story calls for it. Like, I hope each dragon rider and character has a role in the next action to come. And I'll talk about action and battle sequences, but the skeeving and conniving, like, you're drawn out to 4 seasons, so make it worth it and execute it well. That's what I want. And especially when I have my list here. Team Rhaenyra has Cyrax, Caraxes, Vermax, Sea Smoke, Moon Dancer, Vermitor, Silverwing, and Sheepstealer, whereas Team Green only have Vhagar, Dreamfire, which is Helena's dragon, and their younger brother's dragon, which is supposed to be small as well. So, I mean, when you look at that list, I mean, you got to have some good excuses for why that Game of Thrones between those two sides is not going to be over in an afternoon. When you have so many dragons against so few, you know?
Yeah. And they can't pay the blacksmiths to build the scorpions as well, so the King's Landing is pretty much fucked the second Rhaenyra arrives. Yeah. The last thing I'll have to say on it is a little bit like, I just found, I know we've spoken about it already, but the finale I found like a little bit unsatisfying in the sense that I immediately like looked up, like, was this cut short? Because I knew it was 8 episodes, but I figured it would kind of end more cohesively with everything kind of wrapped up. And that they did the montage, which certainly tried to convince you that everything had wrapped up and tease a big kind of loud and bold season 3. But for me, I saw a lot of people say it was like a cliffhanger ending, and for me it was frustrating because I think a cliffhanger is typically what comes after an action or like a big plot development, and then something small changes the state of everything that we thought was the way it was. Like, I guess the way I describe it is a cliffhanger should be a consequence to an action, as opposed to the absence of an action itself.
Yeah, the lead up to an action.
Yeah, because it felt like a lot of the season was, I know we've already touched on this, but like a lot of the season felt like it was building up to a scene that they went, like, get ready for season 3, episode 1. And I was like, I was ready right now, if I'm honest for that. Yeah.
It's a
that's the last thing I've got on it.
It's a season that I think when season 3 comes out, rather than rewatching season 2, I'll watch a recap. You know, I don't think I would go back. I'd rewatch season 1 because I think that is just a superior season. But I think that for season 2, I would rather just watch a quick recap, the highlights, where characters are, and then we go into season 3.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's a marker on quality.
It is,
it?
you know.
Yeah.
Just one last thing before wrapping up. It's not so much on House of the Dragon. It's actually on the new spin-off coming out. Instead of getting a season 3 next year in 2025, we're getting a Night of the Seven Kingdoms, a 6-episode season of the Tales of Dunk and Egg. I don't know if you remember this from the other Game of Thrones show, when Grand Maester Aemon from The Wall was telling that story. This is what the next spin-off is about. It's about Sir Duncan de Tall and his squire. What's his name? Aegon as well? Fuck's sake.
His name's Aegon. Yeah, nicknamed Egg.
Yeah, so these are based on novellas. 3 novellas, so 3 seasons, probably 6 episodes each, but still every 2 years. Don't know why. Are you guys, Nathan and Laurence, are you interested in seeing this? I believe there was a little clip in a sizzle reel from HBO was released along with the second season of The Last of Us and the upcoming prequel series to It.
I think I saw a tiny clip of that because it was in they featured the Penguin footage from the Penguin.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know what is that show just called, The Penguin?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic. I'll watch it because I like this I like the world. I feel like on TV currently there's not a lot that's doing stuff like this. So it kind of scratches that. We've spoken about this before, Nathan, but like I can't really get in on big fantasy, but this is kind of that fantasy light that people say. It's still rooted in this kind of real world, how people talk. Death is death. There's not really a lot of witches bringing people back to life kind of stuff. Like there's a bit of that obviously, but I'm cautiously optimistic. I'll check it out, and if I like it, then I like it, and I hope that I do, because it's a fun world, and I'd really like to see them leave the reputation of the ending of Game of Thrones behind them, because it is a world that's like really ripe for dramatic potential, I think. And House of the Dragon has proved that in some ways, in other ways not. But yeah.
I did watch that HBO sizzle reel, and I got very excited to see the clips from The Last of Us Part 2, and I have no thoughts on this this other spin-off. I couldn't care less about it, to be honest. I know next to nothing about the show. I'll probably watch it when it comes up, but like in terms of like my anticipation for it, I couldn't care less about it, really. It's just, I don't think we need a third game, or I guess a second Game of Thrones spin-off, a third Game of Thrones show. I don't think it's strictly necessary, really. I think at this point you're running the risk of diluting and spreading it too thin, really, I think.
That's fair. They cancelled that Jon Snow TV show or something.
They should have.
Yeah, that should have never been greenlit. Yeah. What are you doing?
I always had a thought about that Jon Snow spin-off, about possibly bringing back Dario Naharis, who was with Daenerys Targaryen before she left him at that triangle building. I forget the name of it, but remember she left him there and she went off across the sea.
Oh yes, yeah.
It would have been possibly investing small scale with major investment to have him hunt down the man who killed the woman she loved.
That's great. I like that concept a lot.
And it would have been a great excuse to bring that actor back, because I really liked him playing Dario Naharis, and he's a guy who could like take out the mountain based on his capabilities with a sword or a spear. So the fact that you just didn't bring that character back at all, I didn't like it. And I thought that Jon Snow series could have done something with that aspect to do good on the failure that everyone deems that Game of Thrones finale. It's all subjective, of course.
I feel like I would have watched that show. That sounds actually really quite interesting.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Talking Pictures Podcast. Before we let you go, Laurence, Nathan, do you guys want to just tell everyone where they can get your podcast? Both of them?
Both of them, yeah. Just wherever you listen to this podcast, just put in the search bar, Another Happy Pod or Still Got Legs. It should come up. It'll be there. Yeah, give it a listen, check them out.
And you have new episodes, so every Monday and Friday.
Every Monday and Friday, yeah. Monday, 10 a.m., Friday, 10 a.m., Wednesday, this one as well. So get your fix.
Brilliant, you've done my job for me. So yeah, make sure to subscribe to us on all of your social medias. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Letterboxd, everywhere that you could possibly find social media.
Are you on LinkedIn? That's
we are on LinkedIn, yes. It's currently 2 people working there, me and Brian.
That's amazing.
Do you post like motivational stuff? Just like the day is what you make of it kind of thing.
No, it's all just like here are the reason why your podcast isn't working. No one's listening. But yeah, available on all social medias, new episodes every single Wednesday, so make sure that you're subscribed in your favorite podcasting app of choice, and we're available on YouTube as well. Brian, any final words before we go?
Big major thanks to our very special guest this week, to Nathan and Laurence. You guys, it's been an absolute privilege to have you come onto our show and get chatting to us about anything. Like, we would have been open to talk about anything, and we were delighted that we got to talk about this, and maybe we can do something again later down in the future. I see that you're quite eagerly excited for The Last of Us, Nathan. Maybe we can...
I am very excited for The Last of Us. I'm looking forward to it with bated breath, so I'll absolutely join you for that.
Brilliant.
Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure being here. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you.